Hello, welcome to ThePrint. I am Amana Begum Ansari. I knew the Europe and America were different from each other, but I didn't have the slightest idea of how deep those differences really were until I came to the UK. My Indian mind saw the West as a one broad cultural space. I really uh, think about how different Europeans and American can be from one another, or how often they clash over politics, identity, history, and even everyday life. As I spent more time here, I began noticing some of the stereotypes each side holds about the others. Europeans often describe Americans as a loud, overly focused on money, and largely unaware of the world beyond their own borders. Americans, on the other hand, see Europeans as having a superiority complex or as being constantly critical of United States unfairly. I thought I had seen most of these debates. Then, to my surprise, I found myself watching a new one unfold over something I could never have imagined: a heat wave. While Europe is currently the fastest warming continent on the earth, warming at more than twice the global average, I was surprised by the amount of schadenfreude the heat waves seem to generate among some Americans. Noah Smith wrote on X, "Just install the goddamn AC and save your grandma's life, Euro friends." It was sarcastic, provocative, and reflected a sentiment shared by many Americans. He was not alone. Patrick Collison, the CEO of Stripe, shared the screenshot generated by Claude, suggesting that Europe's elaborate discourse around the lack of air conditioning was little more than the way of coping with uncomfortable reality that American had been some right about summer all along. Elon Musk reposted it, calling it a banger. A heat wave had somehow turned into another chapter in long running cultural rivalry between Europe and America. Europeans still have very little love for air conditioning. It is not that they cannot afford it. In many cases, they simply do not want it. Only around 20% of households in Europe have air conditioning, compared to nearly 90% in the United States. Even many public buildings, including school, hospital, and government offices, often operate without it. Coming from India, where air conditioning and coolers are increasingly seen as a necessity during the summer, it was difficult to understand why would people choose to endure extreme heat when the technology to escape it already exists and can be afforded by the most Europeans. Europeans take great pride in their historic cities and centuries old buildings, and these buildings cannot easily accommodate AC system without changing their character. The reasoning, however, goes beyond preserving historical buildings. AC consumes huge electricity while expelling heat back into the street. This ends up contributing to the urban heat island effect, and in the long run, making cities even hotter. It is basically a false solution that treats the symptoms while making the problem worse. It's a maladoption, according to European, to climate change, a solution that would make the problem worse. There is also the economic reality. Electricity in much of Europe is considerably more expensive than in countries like United States, making air conditioning not only an environmental question but also a financial one. Rather than cooling every room for the month, many Europeans have traditionally preferred adopting through better building design, ventilation, shading, and simply accepting that a few weeks of discomfort are part of summer. And perhaps the biggest reason is that historically Europe simply did not need it. Summer was too short to justify such a major investment. Why spend thousands on installing air conditioning for a season that until recently lasted only a few weeks? Of course, it was not only Americans who saw an opportunity to score points. Europeans were more than happy to return the favor. Audrey Pulver, the deputy mayor of Paris, responded by reminding Americans that the United States remains one of the world's largest emitters of greenhouse gases. She wrote, as the second largest emitter of the greenhouse gas emission in the world, you bear a significant amount of responsibility for global warming and the consequences we in France are experiencing. Your cities, which are 90% air conditions, are not unrelated to this. Another video also went viral, this time of French women responding with clear sarcasm. She asked whether installing air conditioning everywhere would prevent forest fire or crops failure. Should we put air condition in forest as well or in the field? The French are not only giving it back in the online debate, they're also trying to keep cool in ways that reflect their own approach to the problem. Instead of immediately turning to the air conditioning, many rely on traditional methods, closing exterior shutters during the day to block the sun, opening windows at night to create cross breezes, and taking advantage of the thick stone wall found in many older buildings. One practice that particularly caught my attention was the use of Blanca de Mudon, a chalk-based powder traditionally used in paint and as a cleaning product. Faced with extreme temperatures, some people have begun coating their window with it to reflect sunlight and reduce indoor heat. School and private homes have reportedly adopted the practice as a simple, low-cost way of coping with the heat. Coming from India, these ideas did not feel entirely foreign. We too have long relied on simple ways to cope with extreme heat. Sleeping outside on hot nights, storing water in earthen pots, designing home for ventilation, using courtyards, verandas, and shade long before air conditioning became common. Um, but the air conditioning debate also left me with another thought. Europeans can afford air conditioning and in many cases consciously choose not to install it. Millions of Indians, however, do not have that choice. For most families, owning and running an air conditioner remains a luxury that they simply cannot afford. That is perhaps what worries me the most. As the planet continues to warm, the people who will suffer the harshest consequences are often those with the fewest resources to protect themselves. Climate change is not just an environmental crisis, it is also a question of inequality.